Okay,
So
awesome.
now we've started.
Thank you, Natalie. So again, welcome to our Beyond Awareness Action and Prevention series in honor of Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Sexual Violence Prevention Months during April and May. So if you missed our session 1 and 2 on consent and boundaries, we highly recommend you check it out on our YouTube page. And so today we're talking about relationships, and this will include relationships we have with ourselves, relationships we have with others, and acknowledging how that these change over time as we learn and grow. And so we'll talk more about common relationship themes and some types of relationship abuse as well. And this conversation is not only for intimate partner relationships or domestic relationships, it also includes friendships, colleagues and coworkers and other people such as our family and friends as well. So again, as you trickle in, you can message me or Natalie with any tech issues. You can introduce yourselves in the chat, or you can let us know where you're joining from. We will not be reading names out loud or locations, so you can include that in the chat. And we'll have some anonymous ways to participate later on using Slido, which Natalie briefly mentioned before. So to get things started, I'd just like to introduce ourselves in the center. So my name is Kylee. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Sexual Violence Prevention Coordinator at Amelia Rising. This is Natalie, and she is our Sexual Violence Prevention Educator. Natalie, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, as Kylee said, my name is Natalie, and I am an educator at Amelia Rising. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm glad to be with you all today.
Thank you, Natalie. So again, you can message either of us or both of us if you have any questions or concerns, or use the Q&A box as well. So at Amelia Rising, Sexual Violence Support Center, we offer tools to help people ages 12 and up within the Nipissing District to have healthier and safer relationship. So Amelia Rising offers free counseling for people who have not had their consent respected. And if you'd like more information on our services, you can find us on social media or visit our website at ameliarising.ca. You can also feel free to send us an email or a DM to connect with us on social media, and one of us or a social media admin will reply. With that being said, we would like to open things up by acknowledging that Amelia Rising, our office, resides in North Bay, and North Bay rests on the traditional Anishinaabe territory of Nipissing and Doki's First Nation. This territory is covered by the Robinson-Huron and Upper Canada treaties. We're putting a website in the chat, and we invite you to view it to see what traditional lands you are on or occupying and what treaty you're currently on as well, and what this means for you in your fight against sexual violence and gender-based violence, just because we acknowledge that some folks might be attending outside of the North Bay Nipissing region. And so I personally feel that we can't talk about violence, and so relationship violence, and without acknowledging that violence continually has been committed against this land and the Indigenous people of this land, especially Indigenous women and girls. And this has been done through repeated abuses of state power, colonial rule, and settler violence, resulting in intergenerational harm and trauma. And so I want to recognize that these conversations can have negative activators, and we would like to share a resource, again, in the chat that offers free phone and chat counseling 24/7 for anyone who identifies as Indigenous. And this is called hopeforwellness.ca. So again, there's free phone and chat counseling available in, I believe, 5 different languages. And so I also like to introduce this community-based report and toolkit. So I'm just reading a small quote from the Land Body Defense website. And this community-based report and toolkit for action exposes the devastating impacts that extractive industries like fracking and mining have on the health and safety of Indigenous women. So the Violence on Our Land, Violence on Our Bodies toolkit and report aims to discuss how can we even begin to have a conversation about violence against our bodies when violence against the land has been happening for centuries and continues to happen and disproportionately affect Indigenous women and girls and other folks who have been marginalized by our society. And so again, I do invite you to look at landbodydefense.com to learn more about this initiative and to get access to this toolkit. So now that we're just getting into some of the other workshop components, I just want to again remind folks that they can scan this QR code to participate anonymously at the end of the session, or to ask any anonymous questions or comments. You can use Slido by scanning this QR code with your mobile device. You can join at slido.com and enter the participant code as well. If you're using a laptop or a computer, you can open up a separate tab. And your third option to join is just by clicking the link in the chat that Natalie's provided. And so using one of those three ways to get connected with us on Slido for this session, you can again ask anonymous questions and participate in our quiz later on that will be happening at the end of this workshop to test your knowledge. So again, if you have any questions or comments, throw them into the chat. Myself or Natalie will assist you, or you can use Slido. And with that being said, I will hand it over to Natalie to continue on.
Thanks, Kylee. So you can see the goals on the slide right now, but we did just want to say that the purpose of this workshop is not to teach you how to judge, analyze, or label someone else's relationship. No one can tell another person whether their relationship is healthy or unhealthy. Even if you think somebody's relationship is unhealthy, it is still up to that person to decide what they think and feel. And however, like, there are some widely agreed upon traits or signs in relationships that are healthy and unhealthy. And this workshop is to help us reflect on the ways we think about relationships in general in our own lives. And there are many components involved in preventing gender-based violence and working on having healthier relationships, and recognizing healthier relationships is just one of the ways that we can do that. But also to hit all of these workshop goals as well. And so I will go on to the agenda. So we'll be looking at the relationship traits and what safety in relationships feels like. We'll look at some warning signs of like when something is verging on being not just unhealthy, but actually kind of abusive. 6 types of relationship abuse, 6 relationship themes. And as Kylee said, at the end, there will be a Slido quiz to test your knowledge of what we've talked about throughout the workshop. And so we can get into it now by talking about some healthy relationship traits. This is not an exhaustive list. You can feel free to screenshot it if you want to. It'll also be available in the slides, which you can email me for after the workshop. So as I said, this is not an exhaustive list, meaning that we can always add to this. However, there are some important characteristics that we like to emphasize. Most characteristics all have communication, respect, and trust in common. So take a look at the list. What stands out to you? If you feel comfortable, you can share your thoughts in the chat. You can share your thoughts in the anonymous Slido Q&A. You can say if there's anything you wanted to add to the list or wanted to expand on. Is there anything on this list you didn't think of before? The bottom line is that a relationship should make you feel safe, supported, at ease, and heard. And we know that this can't happen all of the time in relationships, but it should happen most of the time.
Thank you, Natalie.
Kylee.
So I will continue on. I do apologize, my audio and video quality may not be the best, so I'm trusting that Natalie or someone in the chat will just let me know if it gets too unbearable, and hopefully Natalie will be able to take over if that happens. So continuing on, we'd like to discuss some unhealthy relationship traits, and we just want to be clear that these are that there are a lot of things in relationships that can be considered unhealthy, and the important thing to focus on is the way you feel in the relationship. So always trust your gut, and the important thing to focus on, like I said, sorry, is to always trust your gut and go with what you feel. And so with that being said, manipulation, lack of trust, and passive or aggressive communication are a few unhealthy relationship flags. And some unhealthy relationship characteristics can be worked on if everyone in the relationship is open, willing, and wanting to improve the relationship by identifying some of these unhealthy flags and solving them together. And on the other hand, some of these characteristics are more complicated and might require more than a conversation, more than hard work, and more than love, because we know that, love is not the only thing that we need in a relationship. And we'll talk about that as one of the 6 relationship themes later. Unhealthy characteristics may be fixed. However, like I said, they can also develop further into abusive tactics or abusive love, which is not easy to untangle. And so again, I just want to be clear that, all relationships can have some unhealthy traits and signs. And again, these can grow into something worse where they become abusive, or they can be tackled upfront and resolved to proceed with the relationship in a healthy, safe way. Or that is a relationship that we may choose to disconnect from and distance ourselves from if it's too unhealthy and becomes abusive, if we're able to separate from that. And so what are some starting signs from when those unhealthy relationship traits start to trickle into abusive? What are some things that we can look for? And we want to expand on, again, what it looks like when a relationship goes from just being from being unhealthy and having some of these unhealthy flags to abusive. And some of these early signs can be hard to see as abuse, especially when we're close to it, or the abuse is coming from someone that we love or someone that loves us. And we have collected a few important starting signs. And this, again, is not an exhaustive list, but these are some common warning signs to keep in mind. These signs can be precursors to additional violence or indicators that something is wrong in a relationship. And again, these aren't limited to intimate partner or domestic relationships. Some of these can also exist in various relationships, including friendships, family members, colleagues, or other people in position of power or authority over us. And so with looking at some of these, again, the extreme jealousy or insecurity and possessiveness, again, is a starting sign. It's something that we'll talk about when you go past extreme jealousy and insecurity, possessiveness. It can get dangerous into regards of like stalking behaviors and criminal harassment behaviors. One that I do like to point out as well is folks that are in a relationship with someone who's physically hurting someone else or displaying violent behavior, such as punching a wall or throwing an object. And though that person may not be violent directly to us, they're violent towards folks around us and the environment around us, which is usually a precursor for violence that will be happening to us later on. And so see, these are just some warning signs and starting signs that something may be going from unhealthy into abusive. And so again, you can put any questions in the Q&A or chat if there's anything you'd like to elaborate on or have any questions about, and we will do our best to provide some answers. And so with that conversation being said, what does safety and security feel like? And we want to focus on that feeling, because sometimes on the outside, a relationship can look healthy and look a certain way, but if we trust our gut, we will realize that sometimes we don't actually feel safe and secure in that relationship. And knowing healthy and unhealthy traits is important, and we can look at these characteristics in our relationship. However, we also need to focus, like I said, on our feelings that we get from these relationships. Our feelings can help us navigate whether we truly feel safe and or if we're only under the impression that it's safe because we check a few healthy characteristics. And so I will look at, I want to reference this image here that you can also see by going to the Secure Relationship on Instagram or checking out their website or other social media pages. And so when we're looking at what secure relationships feel like, we can ask ourselves, do I feel like my needs equally matter in the relationship? Do I feel appreciated most of the time? Do I feel that my partner will be there for me when I need them, and all of these things. So when we're asking ourselves, is this person's actions and these feelings of safety and security lining up with what we want in this relationship? And so if we don't feel safe or secure, this can be a sign that our body is telling us, if we have, that gut reaction. So if we don't feel safe or supported in a relationship, our body might be telling us that with, disassociation or not remembering things from the relationship, or various other things that might come up that we just are kind of blocking out the unhealthy parts of the relationship. So, for example, if you continually feel unheard, devalued, or not appreciated in your relationship, this can affect how secure you feel about it, but it may be harder to see these things as deal breakers if your relationship has a lot of healthy traits. And relationships don't have to be overtly abusive or unhealthy to mean that they are not the right relationship for you. And you have every right to walk away from a relationship for whatever reason. For whatever reason, you don't have to justify it to anyone, including yourself. And so, sorry, I meant to, again, ask the question, have you ever neglected your gut feeling of something being wrong in a relationship? Is this something that we sometimes tend to do when we, again, are kind of visually looking at the relationship and checking off boxes that, you know, they do this and they're nice and they love me and they clean up or cook dinner, whatever, they do all these nice things, but we still might not feel safe or secure deep down. So always trust your gut, and it's okay to feel your feelings. So in talking about relationships, we want to acknowledge that there are 6 different types of relationship abuse or violence. These are 6 that we have identified, and you may have seen different terms for them. But these are the different kinds of abuse that we are going to be talking about today, and we'll review the definitions of each, and then we'll be doing an activity where we'll look at sorting through some of these definitions using a quiz later. So between me and Natalie, we will continue to just kind of expand on these definitions. So physical violence is something that we often see and is talked about the most. It's unwanted or non-consensual hitting, slapping, strangulation, kicking, grabbing, pulling hair, pushing, shoving, any sort of physical behavior or activity. It can also, like I said before, involve hitting things around you or hitting a wall, or even throwing things objects even around you and not necessarily at you. And so again, this can include punching a wall, throwing a lamp, banging their hands on a table, or anything like that to threaten or scare you, or all forms of physical violence or abuse. And if you have any other examples for any of these, please add them into the chat or the Q&A. Natalie?
Awesome. Yes, and I also did just want to say as well that while you see these 6 types of abuse, if you were in our boundaries workshop last week, you will note that these 6 types of abuse do line up with the 6 types of boundaries people have, and the kinds of boundary violations that can happen. So just with that being said, I did want to move on to the emotional, psychological abuse, which can be both silent and verbal. So this can be like putting you down, embarrassing you in public, and that's online or offline, threatening you in any way, telling you what to do, what to wear, threatening suicide as a form of control. So like, if you leave me, I have no reason to live, accusing you of cheating. And it's sort of just anything that is meant to like emotionally manipulate you or cross your emotional boundaries.
Thank you, Natalie. And again, any examples or questions, you can add them into the chat. And as Natalie said, these do reflect our boundary violations from the previous workshop. And you will notice, as with the boundary violations, that some of these types of abuse and violence can also intersect and go hand in hand. As Natalie mentioned, for emotional, psychological violence, that can occur in person or online, which would then be digital, which we'll talk about in a second. So sexual violence is something, again, that is often talked about and in the media. So again, sexual violence can include anything from pressuring or forcing you to do anything sexual that you're not comfortable with or intimate, anything that you do not consent to or do not want to consent to. This includes sexting, restricting access to birth control, unwanted kissing or touching, unwanted sexual comments, such as like catcalling as a form of street harassment. So that is a form of sexual harassment as well. And so again, these definitions are quite broad because there are so many things included in them. So again, if you have any questions, please let us know. And Natalie will continue.
And so that brings us to financial abuse, which can look like demanding access to your money, preventing you from working, and insisting that if they pay for you, you owe them something in return. So there's, other examples of this can look like if you're just getting into a relationship with someone and they sort of say that they need like a short-term loan that they're not really intending to pay back. It can also look like hiding your car keys or your bus pass so that you physically cannot get to a job. It can also look like saying that they would watch your kids, like saying that they would provide childcare that they don't really intend on providing. It can look like lots of things. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are just some examples. And I will pass back to Kylee, who will talk about digital abuse.
Thanks, Natalie. Again, financial abuse is something that we sometimes also often see with elderly people being financially abused, whether it's through a scam or even, unfortunately, their own kids or grandkids financially abusing them. And so, again, a reminder that these relationship abuses and violences can exist in any form of relationship at any age, gender, and anything. So digital violence includes sending threats via text, over social media, over email. Digital violence can include like digital stalking or embarrassing you on social media, such as posting photos that you did not consent to having shared, whether they're sexual or not, hacking into your social media, your email accounts, obviously without permission, forcing you to share your passwords. This is something that we sometimes see in young relationships where, to prove your trust and your loyalty, you have to share all of your passwords and all of that. And that's just not the case. You do not have to share your passwords. That is your private information and you're entitled to have your privacy. Someone who's constantly texting or calling you to check up on you. This is something, again, we sometimes see romanticized as being loving and caring and supportive. And yes, people can text you to check up and call to check up. But when it is all the time, and if you don't answer them, you get in trouble, or they blow up on you, or they guilt you or make you feel bad, that's where we see some sort of, again, that digital online type of violence. And again, frequently like looking through your phone or trying to look through your phone, trying to get your phone password, monitoring your texts, your phone calls, who you're talking to online, and what you're posting online, what you're doing online, all of that. We also see digital violence more now, again, with the like Google Home technology and like being able to track inside the house with cameras and monitoring movement in the house and outside the house. And unfortunately, this digital violence is increasing in creative ways, unfortunately. And so Natalie will end with the sixth form of violence and abuse. So Natalie.
Yeah, so it's spiritual. And just like people have spiritual boundaries, there can also be spiritual abuse. And this can look a lot like using religion, faith, or spiritual beliefs as a tool for control, ridicule, or to have power over another person. And you can use, this can involve using spirituality to manipulate someone. And some examples from the National Domestic Violence Hotline in the US include ridicules or insults the other person's religious or spiritual beliefs, prevents the other partner from practicing their religious or spiritual beliefs, uses the partner's religious or spiritual beliefs to manipulate or shame them, forces the children, forces any children that are being raised to be raised in a faith that the other partner has not agreed to. And it can also, religious or spiritual texts can be used to minimize or rationalize abusive behaviors, such as any of the abuses that we've gone through in this section. And so any of these abuses can happen in a partnership, domestic relationship, marriage, casual dating. Abuse and violence does not limit itself to one type of relationship. So it's important to note. Yeah. So, okay. So we're going to move on to the 6 relationship themes. We have 6 of them, and it's important to keep in mind for your current and future relationships with yourself and others, whether they're an intimate partner, friend, or family member. Most of these can apply across relationships, except for falling in love and intimate partner violence. And so I will get it started with the relationship itself. We know that a relationship with a person or maybe multiple people or group of people, it can be meaningful, deep, long-lasting, or they can be short and casual. The relationship with yourself is ongoing. Relationships are not simply good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. Most relationships have qualities of both. We should try to maximize the good ones, change the challenging ones, and the harmful ones safely if or when we can. Some good things to consider are the qualities you'd like or not like in friendships, relationships, and what your values and boundaries are. And on the next slide, we just have some questions for consideration. So have you ever felt conflicted as to whether a relationship you have is healthy or unhealthy? You can feel free to put answers anonymously in the Q&A down here, or in the chat, or in the anonymous Q&A in Slido. Have you ever felt that you needed to compromise your values or beliefs to make a relationship work? And have you ever taken the time to seriously consider what you want and need from your relationships? And with that, I will pass it over to Kylee, who will go over jealousy some more.
Thanks, Natalie. And so again, these relationship themes may or may not be present in almost all of your relationships. And so that brings me to jealousy. And this is something that I'm sure we're all familiar with. And jealousy usually stems from either not feeling good enough with ourselves, or having an internal sense of shame, maybe low self-confidence, or a lack of trust in the relationship. And jealousy, like I said, can stem from so many different areas, and we're all different, but a lot of us have felt that feeling of jealousy. And jealousy can be healthy, but it can also be unhealthy. And it can be normal to have these feelings of jealousy, most importantly. And so it's the way we react to these feelings of jealousy that indicate if the jealousy is healthy or not. And so some things to consider, questions that can be used to process jealousy. I don't know if we have them. Have you ever felt jealous of someone close to you? Has anyone ever talked to you? Skipping ahead, my apologies. Some things in regards to jealousy is like when we're talking about processing our jealousy, some of the things we can ask ourselves is like, why are we jealous? Why are we feeling like this? So there's something further down that we need to kind of assess within ourselves. For example, if we're jealous of a teammate for getting, voted MVP, we might be jealous because we feel that we're not being recognized, or our efforts aren't being recognized on the team. And so it has nothing to do with our team player getting MVP. We're super proud of them, but we're still jealous. And so again, it reflects more with ourselves versus our teammate, right? And so we can ask ourselves, how might I lessen my jealousy? So sometimes just talking ourselves through it logistically can help, by having that mental conversation with, I actually don't hate my teammate for getting MVP. I'm really proud of them, but it just really sucks that I'm feeling jealous because I wish that was me, or, I would like to be recognized as well. And so just having that conversation with yourself, asking yourself if this is a healthy or rational cause for jealousy. So again, are there any actual evidence or proof that can rationalize this jealousy, or is this something that we're catastrophizing and kind of making into something that isn't real, and our jealousy is maybe again stemming from something a little deeper? And how is this jealousy showing up for us in affecting our relationships? So again, if we're maybe jealous of maybe we see our partner has a new follower, and we see that follower, and maybe we're really jealous that they're now interacting with this person. Again, how is this affecting our relationship? Are we now psycho stalking that person on Instagram, or are we having a conversation with our partner about, hey, how do you know this person? I have concerns, or I feel this certain way, and maybe having conversations about that instead of letting it negatively, impact a relationship by again, catastrophizing and kind of spiraling out of control with this feeling of jealousy. So it is important to always check in with ourselves. And again, sorry, on the next slide, we can ask ourselves questions like just like normalizing our jealousy. So have we ever felt jealous of someone close to us? Whether that's a sibling, a friend, or a family member, or even an intimate or romantic partner. So just asking, like recognizing that, we have had feelings of jealousy in the past before. Has anyone ever talked to us about how to process our feelings of jealousy? And so just having some compassion for ourselves and recognizing that, I was never told that jealousy isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing because it can tell us what our wants and needs are in a relationship or in a circumstance if we are feeling jealous. For example, a friend accepting their offer to a master's program. If you're super jealous about something like that, it could be internal with, you wanting to go and do your master's and you're feeling jealous that you're not pursuing that goal as well. And so jealousy can tell us a lot about ourselves. And again, just having that compassion that maybe we were never talked about and how to process our feelings of jealousy. And again, what do we think feelings of jealousy are bad, and why do we have those thoughts, and what makes us feel that jealousy is bad, or what makes us think that that jealousy is always a bad and negative thing, when sometimes it's a natural part of relationships and something that we will experience in almost all of our relationships. And so just normalizing this feeling and being able to have like a rational thought process regarding it, and just checking in with ourselves is super important. So again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. I would like to move on to our third theme, which is falling in love. So again, this theme, the other two themes can be across all relationships. However, falling in love is with your intimate or romantic relationships. So something, again, that I'm sure we're familiar with is the notion of falling in love. And you may have noticed that we did put an asterisk next to this theme because we want to acknowledge that not everyone falls in love, and falling in love or falls in love in the way that we are about to describe. So such as folks who are aromantic or on the ace spectrum. And so for those who do fall in love and have experienced that, it can cause very intense feelings in our heart and in our brain. And so our brain chemicals actually do drive us to want to constantly be with that person when we're having that feeling of love, that feeling of intensity and passion. And the feeling of falling in love feels amazing. And like being with that person, we can kind of get that serotonin, adrenaline rush from the beginning of a relationship. And that's what we can become sometimes addicted to. And I'll talk about that in a little second. So again, falling in love, it might result in us putting that person on a pedestal and dropping everything for them. So again, something else to kind of be mindful of when we are having these feelings. And we can also fall in love many times in our life. Some people believe that and some people don't, and that's fine. Everyone's different. But for the most part, people can fall in love or have love or be in love with different people at different times. And so it is, something that we will have to navigate at some point in our lives, most likely. And so the bad news is that our brain chemical reaction is so strong when we're falling in love sometimes, that it doesn't always last as long as the relationship when it matures. So for example, feelings of romantic love can be fleeting and intense, sometimes referred to as lust. So strong, intense, lust, which is like strong, intense, or passionate, but short-term feelings. Eventually, that love may grow into, that romantic love might grow into a nurturing type of love where we are more stable in the relationship and we can progress further. And it's gone past that initial boost of energy. However, sometimes if those intense feelings of love or lust don't go away, they can become addictive and unhealthy, where we start to hyper focus on that feeling of lust and love on our partner. And so again, this is more of the visual. So we might start in with that romantic honeymoon kind of traditional love that we see is always portrayed in the media and as the ideal goal. And again, we might not all be able to fit into that box. So this is an interesting theme because it doesn't apply to everyone. But yeah, like for general purposes, when we're talking about that type of love, typically it'll either fizzle out or it'll develop into that nurturing, loving relationship where we can grow something and grow something more with that person. Or sometimes that relationship can become addictive in the sense where we're now addicted to that person. We're constantly putting them first and neglecting ourselves and others in our life. So another reason, sorry, I don't know if there's another, yeah. So we would like to also ask folks, like, have you ever felt pressure to find or to be in love? And so that's why this theme is, again, so important, just because it is often it's often in the media and portrayed to us at such a young age that our goal is to find love, be in love, and have a partner forever. And so another reason we put an asterisk on this section is that there's a few ideas you want to challenge when it comes to falling in love. So there seems to be this race to love, pressure to fall in love, especially for young women and girls. There's also that race to find this amazing feeling of love. And we want to question why. Why is it considered normal to always be in state of, in love, always be in state of finding love, especially at a young age? We see that with the Disney princesses and all of these young rom-coms and TV shows that always have the main character, usually if it's a woman or a guy, there's always a circling love interest at such a young age. And so this pressure to be in love can also negatively affect us, those of us on the ACE spectrum, like aromantics who may not experience this, and this can add to a feeling that they're not normal. And so again, just kind of having these conversations with ourselves and asking ourselves, have we ever had these conversations? Like, have we ever been told about the difference between nurturing, romantic, or addictive love? Has anyone ever had these conversations with us? Have we been familiar, between the differences of lust and love? Is that something we might have experienced in past relationship? Is that something we might be experiencing now? And again, have we ever felt that pressure to find or be in love? I know I definitely feel the pressure as a young woman in her 20s to find love, get married, have kids, da 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 da. And, it's just something that isn't for me at this time. And so that's okay. This is a relationship theme that for me at the moment doesn't apply, but I can definitely look back at past relationships and acknowledge that some of them did come into an addictive love, or some of them had the potential to be a nurturing love. And so these are just ways that we can reflect on ourselves and what love means to us and our journey to find it or pursue it or not to.
Thanks, Kylee. And before we get in, we seem to have a comment. People seem to be infatuated with love stories via Hollywood. That's definitely true. Absolutely. They definitely are.
I was just going to say, trying to match up to those standards of Hollywood romantics. I always think of The Notebook. It's a really cute movie. Yeah. But I mean, we can love stuff like that, but also acknowledge that some Hollywood romances and things like that are just really far-fetched and not made to apply to everyone. But yes, absolutely. Yes. So being aware of that.
Yeah. And people have looked at The Notebook and stuff and have actually found there to be some pretty unhealthy relationship traits in that love story. So thank you for putting that in the chat, because we love to back and forth with folks. So now we are going to move on to communication. And if you remember or were present for last week's boundaries workshop, we did talk about 4 different kinds of communication styles. Kylee is going to be putting a resource in the chat from the UK Violence Intervention and Prevention Center on the 4 different kinds of communication styles, so that you can get acquainted with those if you missed that session. And so we did want to talk about the important role of communication itself in relationships. It is really foundational and a core component of what determines the safety, security, and even success of a relationship. Although success does look different for everybody. So just wanted to say that. Miscommunication and communication breakdown is a common factor in the strain or disillusion of many relationships of all kinds: friendships, relationships with family, relationships at work, but yes, also romantic relationships as well. And effective communication that makes both people feel heard, understood, appreciated, and seen is when the most safety and security is found, as we mentioned at the beginning of the workshop. And so a tool that we have found relevant to aiding communication is understanding your communication style. So we don't have time right now to go over all the different communication styles, but they were passive, passive-aggressive, aggressive, and assertive. And so you can watch the recording of the boundaries workshop from last week on our YouTube channel, or check out this resource in the chat if you are interested in learning more about your communication style. And so we just did want to throw out another question for consideration. You can put your answers in the chat or in the anonymous Q&A options. Which communication style are you most familiar with? What did you grow up with? You know, like I know for me, I grew up with a passive aggressive communication style. And that's the one that I knew. And I've had to work really hard at changing my communication style to being more assertive. But we also did want to remind folks that we all can engage in all of the communication styles at different points, depending on relationship and circumstance. But it's just, there are some main ones that people do tend to have. And so which communication style do you think leads to the most fulfilling relationships? We can see if anybody has any thoughts on that. But I did want to move on to talking about intimate partner violence. So intimate partner violence is any physical, sexual, or emotional violence, or it can even be any of the other types of abuse that we covered before. And it's really about like controlling. It's about controlling behaviors by a current or former partner. And in fact, the rate of violence by dating partners is 42% higher than by strangers. I know that we all hear, you know, like I'm hoping by now this new, like, it's not just stranger danger, like it's usually somebody that you know. I've seen more shows and I've seen more TV news stories about how it is mostly somebody that you know. And in North Bay, the North Bay police responded to an average of 3 domestic calls a day in 2018. And so we did, on the next slide, want to show you a video that does talk about the abuse cycle. So we did want to give a content warning for that in case any of this information, you know, is activating for you. Please access the supports on the bottom of the slide.
There are 2 key things about domestic violence we want to tell you about. First, it happens in a cycle. And second, it's about power and control. Domestic violence happens in a cycle. This cycle looks different in every relationship, but it tends to follow the same pattern. Every relationship starts in the honeymoon phase. During this time, the couple becomes very close emotionally, the effect of the generosity, helpfulness, and genuine interest from the partner. In this phase, your partner makes you feel important, cared for, listened to, and valued. Then it fades and moves into the tension-building phase, a period of increasing pressure, mood swings, irritability, demands, and emotional withdrawal. This phase may feel like you're walking on eggshells. You can tell something is about to happen. Once the tension reaches an unbearable level, it ends with the explosive episode. This is when the abusive outbursts happen. This can be a push or a shove, a threat being made or carried out, or more high-risk behaviors like choking or strangulation. However, this doesn't last forever. The cycle comes full circle, and we're back in the honeymoon phase. Gifts, reconciliation, physical affection, attention, promises, or apologies. During this phase, it feels like things are finally back to normal. You are reminded of the reasons why you fell in love with this person. You are beginning again. Over time, the honeymoon phase will become shorter and sometimes will fade completely. But why does the cycle continue? What brings people together is love, and people stay in the cycle because they have hope that things can change, will change, or go back to the way they once were. And many are afraid of what might happen if they try to leave. Remember, it's not unusual to be in this cycle, and you're not alone if you are. So
the other part of that kind of talks about power and control, which we will get to at our power and control webinar later on in the series. And so we just wanted to ask if you all had any thoughts, feelings, or reactions. Well communicated, thank you. To that,
I was going to add my thoughts or feelings or reactions, but I do always enjoy this video simply because it acknowledges that the outburst stage is not always a physical outburst. It can be a verbal outburst or a threat or any type of violent, abusive behavior, whether physical or not. And that tension building stage tends to get longer. The honeymoon phase starts to get shorter, and that tension building phase and the outburst phase start to get longer and sort of just go back and forth. And I do want to acknowledge, again, that video did say that, some folks might not leave because of that hope of love or returning back to the way things used to be. But again, a big piece of that is also, not even acknowledging or not being able to recognize the situation if you're close to it, and also being unable to leave due to the fear of life or safety for yourself, kids, or even a pet. We see that a lot as well, as a pet being used as bait, essentially, to keep someone in an unhealthy, abusive or violent relationship. So again, Natalie, is there anything else you wanted to add before we moved on?
So we did want to acknowledge and emphasize that the honeymoon phase in these relationships can often lay a lot of groundwork and opportunity for coercive control and psychological or emotional violence. This is where coercive behaviors are more subtle, but can be harder to recognize because they are accompanied by sweeter behaviors. And also because of the things that we've discussed about falling in love. And so it's like the honeymoon phase is, the honeymoon phase, but it's also during that phase that a lot of these things can develop. And so then, like you said, eventually the honeymoon phase can disappear altogether, and then we've got intimate partner violence. So that's the only thing that I had. I just was wondering if anyone else had any more thoughts. Feel free to put them in the chat, and if not, then we can move on to talking about independence.
Thanks, Natalie. Just a thought I had about when you were mentioning about that honeymoon stage being the laying the groundwork for coercive control. So a quick example of that is, a partner showing up at work with flowers. At the beginning, it may be a really sweet, kind, romantic gesture. However, this can quickly and easily turn into dropping flowers off at work just to check in on you, monitor, make sure you're not talking to your male staff or coworkers or boss, just monitoring to make sure that you're actually at work, because maybe they're, accusing you of cheating and not being at work, like all those things. So again, just something to be mindful of and to consider in relationships. So
I was just saying, for sure, yeah.
So our last relationship theme, actually one of my favorites, is independence. And so again, when we have a relationship with someone, it's important to always make sure that our relationship allows us to have friends, allows us to have hobbies and ideas and parts of our life that are our very own and separate or private from the relationship. And so a good relationship, whether it's intimate, romantic, a friendship, a family relationship, a work relationship, should consist of independent individuals who are connected. And so we use a Venn diagram analogy with the terms me, you, and us to kind of focus and separate our idea of the relationship and how we need to sometimes balance between the relationship, focusing on the relationship, focusing on ourselves, and focusing on the other person in the relationship. And so before I show you that, a question we like to ask is, have you ever felt limited, isolated, or that you've lost yourself or compromised too much of yourself in a relationship? And so you can just ponder that for a second. You don't have to answer it in the chat at all. You can if you want, but you don't have to. Just something to think about. We do often, I will say, a lot of young people, including myself, get into relationships at a young age. And then you grow into different people, your individuality might be lost because you are so tied to that other person. And we'll talk about in a second, like how important it is to always have yourself in a relationship. And to, not that relationship with yourself is just as important as the relationship with the other person as well. So when we're talking about relationships and we're talking about our independence within a relationship, we can think of this as me, us, and them. So when you're looking at your relationship, how much are you focusing on the me, on myself, on my relationship with myself? Am I aware of my needs and my wants and desires? Do I prioritize myself and my values? Do I enjoy my independence and my hobbies and my family and my friends and my free time? So again, we might need to prioritize ourselves as much as we prioritize others. We might spend some time, to truly get to know yourself, get to know your wants and your likes and your dislikes, your needs and your desires, and what brings you joy. Identify these values, these boundaries and beliefs that you're not willing to compromise on, and what you're okay with being flexible with. So again, some of that relates directly back to our boundaries workshop and, figuring out what our boundaries are, what we're okay with being flexible with, what we're not okay being flexible with. Be mindful to not only focus on yourself and your needs in a relationship. Be mindful, obviously, that we need to focus on ourselves in our relationship, but we don't want to lose ourselves in a relationship, right? So there is that balance of making sure that, these three things might not be in balance at all times in a relationship. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but just making sure that there is some sort of balance between the three. I do have a little self-love wheel created by Self-Love Rainbow on Instagram. And so these are just a few ways that we might practice our own self-love or caring for ourselves in different ways, whether it's through caring for our mental health, caring for our boundaries, establishing which boundaries of ours are rigid, flexible, or permeable, caring for ourselves, listening to our inner voice, and accepting that we don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. And so these are just a few foundations of how we can focus on ourselves in a relationship and check in with ourselves. Natalie's going to talk about the us in the relationship, and how sometimes, as much as we love ourselves and focus on ourselves, obviously in a relationship it takes two, and we also need to focus on the us in the relationship with the other person.
So thanks, Kylie. So if you're in a relationship with another person or with people, there is value in focusing a healthy amount of energy into the us, spending quality time together, being genuine, supporting each other's beliefs, goals, and hobbies, learning about communication style, learning about, what shared goals do you have? What do you like doing together? And, it can, if there's not enough of the us work, it can create a lot of distance. And then the us, may not be an us anymore. But then we did want to acknowledge on the other side that too much us can also turn into a form of isolation and dependency. And sometimes this can lead to losing yourself and connections with, others that you love. So if you're spending all of your time with your partner, you might begin to neglect, friendships or relationships with family. And you might neglect yourself and your own needs or your own self-care. So it is important to know what finding a balance looks like and feels like for you. And, to ensure that it's not trending over to the addictive love side of things, and that it's becoming that nurturing love where, both, the me and the them can grow together. side by side. And so Kylee will talk more about the them aspect.
Thanks, Natalie. So just for review, we have the me, the myself part, focusing on our wants, needs, desires, and just making sure that we do have an independent life outside of our partner or this relationship in our life. Again, focusing on the us, though, we need a balance to put in time and energy to, have a successful relationship with the other person. It takes two to tango, or however you want to say it. But then sometimes it is important to prioritize the other person. And so these three sections should be in balance majority of the time. However, there are situations where we might need to focus on our friend or our loved one a bit more. Are they injured? Do we need to assist them more with mobility if they have a broken leg or an ankle? Do they have an illness? Maybe we're helping them get over a cold. Is it their birthday soon? Is their birthday coming up? Do we want to do something special for them? There are healthy ways to focus on them in the relationship, so the other person. But again, if we give too much to them, we can begin to lose ourselves, or we can become burnt out, and then sometimes resentful if we are constantly putting that other person above everyone, including ourselves. And so the difference between the them and the us is that the us is an equal contribution from everyone in the relationship to make things work and communicate and respect boundaries. But the them is when we are too focused on the other person in the relationship, and there isn't that balance, right? And so we begin to see that the more we focus too much on one section, the other sections can get smaller on us. So again, always be sure to check in on yourself and your relationships. Where do they fall? Is there a relationship? Is there a relationship that's out of balance? And where do they fall? Is this, what steps do we need to get in contact to maintain a relationship or to distance ourselves from a relationship? And we do have an activity that we'll introduce to you in a little bit about how we can maybe navigate some of these relationships. And it's an activity you can do on your own time after that we'll give you. If you're interested in kind of assessing your current connections and relationships in your life and seeing where they might fall and what you might want to bring closer to yourself or distance yourself from. And so with that being said, I would like to invite you to join our online quiz using the QR code by scanning it with your mobile phone or device. You can also join using the link in the chat or going to slido.com and entering in our participant code. So there are lots of ways to join. You can use, when we join in a second, it'll ask you to put your name on to join. So again, we want to keep things anonymous. I will be screen sharing, so please use an alias name or your initials if you do not want your name being shown on the screen when you are about to join the chat, and I'll bring it up in just a second. I will bring up Slido in just a second. So again, if you use your real name, it will be recorded, so and released for folks to join and watch later on. So again, if you don't want your name being seen, you can join with an alternate name, a fake name, whatever you would like. Awesome. So we've got 2 folks that have joined so far. Again, you can join by using the QR code. You can join by visiting slido.com. And this is just going to be a friendly quiz to see and to review everything that we've talked about today. So if you're able to join and participate, that's awesome. If you're not, if you don't want to join or you're not interested or not able to, that's totally okay. We're still going to go through all the questions together. But this is always a fun way to kind of review the information and learn from each other and kind of ask questions in a friendly little knowledge competition. So again, we'll give you a few moments if anyone else wants to join. I see a few other people have joined our webinar, so I will just wait a second in case anyone else would like to join. If you have any questions, please let myself or Natalie know if you're having issues getting joined. Okay, well, I don't see anyone else who is joining. That's too bad, but if you do change your mind, you're more than welcome to join us throughout this quiz at any time by, again, using the link in the chat, scanning this QR code, or joining us at slido.com with the participant code 721776. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know, but we're going to get started with the quiz with the folks who would like to participate. And with that being said, we will get started in just a second. Okay. And the questions are timed. We increased the time though for 30 seconds to have a little bit more time to answer, just due to feedback. So we are anxious and excited to get started with question number 1. Which of the following is a healthy relationship trait? Respect, individuality, fighting fair, problem solving, feelings of safety, or all of the above? And so you have 10 seconds left to provide an answer. I see another person has joined. That's awesome. So everyone has chosen all of the above, and that is the correct answer. All of these are healthy relationship traits. And I just want to, again, clarify fighting fair. This doesn't mean, this is to acknowledge that fights do occur in a relationship, or disagreements do occur in a relationship. Again, it's about the fairness and having that conversation within that fight or disagreement, and not, being manipulative, using passive aggressiveness or any aggressive communication to, insult the other person or belittle them or anything like that. So when we say fighting fair, we just mean having like a mature conversation and a way to kind of have that disagreement in a safe, healthy way. So thank you. I see some other folks have joined us. That's awesome. Moving on. So looking at the leaderboard, we got teal in number 1. So again, you get extra points for answering the quickest as well. So we'll move on to the next question. And this is a scenario about an unhealthy relationship trait. So your friend tells you that they're always having to tiptoe around their partner because they're unsure what will upset them. What unhealthy relationship trait is this? Is this gaslighting, passive aggression, walking on eggshells, or being self-centered? Natalie, feel free if you do want to expand on anything. I'm just going to keep going through the quiz just for ease, but definitely chime in if there's anything you want to add. So it looks like we've had some mixed reviews. We've got passive aggression and walking on eggshells. So the correct answer for this specific scenario is this is an example of walking on eggshells. And passive aggressiveness is a reason why we might walk on eggshells. For example, if the person is saying something along the lines, I'm trying to think of an example on the spot. Natalie, do you have anything?
So like passive aggression might be a reason that somebody would walk on eggshells because they're sort of like never sure when somebody is going to pull passive aggression on them. So it's part of it for sure. So, you might walk on eggshells if you realized before you got home that you forgot to get something from the grocery store. And, that person is going to be like, oh, well, it's not like it's hard to just stop by the store and get that thing.
Yeah, so. That's a great example. Thank you, Natalie. If you have any other questions for anyone, you can, again, put them in the Q&A or send us a message. So we've got a few more folks that have joined us. That's awesome. Jennifer takes the lead. We'll move on to the next question. Which of the following is a starting sign of potential abuse? Punching walls or throwing furniture, monitoring spending, dictating who you can see, what you can do, what you can wear, monitoring location, or all of the above? And so we got everyone saying all of the above. That is the correct answer. It's kind of a trick question. So these are definitely starting signs of potential abuse, and I would even argue are abusive. So punching walls or throwing furniture, again, we talked about that being a precursor to physical abuse towards on us. And this is an example of, that abuse, that physical abuse around us. Monitoring spending, again, an example, a preamble into that financial abuse. It might start off with monitoring your spending, and then it kind of comes into, you can't spend this on that, and I need money for this, you can't use it for that kind of thing. Dictating who you can see, what you can do, what you can wear. These are all, again, some starting signs. I mean, this is like an unhealthy thing to have in a relationship. And these are, again, precursors to abuse or violence that can worsen later down the road. And so having that, during a honeymoon phase, saying, no, babe, you can't wear that dress. It doesn't look the greatest on you. Wear this one, maybe seem cute at the beginning. However, it can be that precursor into, no, you can't wear that. I will not let you leave the house in that outfit, and can get very controlling very easily. And again, monitoring location might be something cute at the beginning, like, hey, let me know when you get to so-and-so, or, let me know when you're moving from this cafe to that restaurant and going shopping, just they want to check in on you. I want you to be safe. But it can get, again, progressively worse and worse and worse, and become, abusive. So again, these are just some things to kind of be wary of and just keep in the back of your head. Anything you want to add, Natalie?
No, I think you got it. Like, I think the thing that I was thinking about, like somebody, wanting, like telling you like, oh, like that dress doesn't look the best on you. It can be seen as like honesty. Like it can just be like, oh, this person's really honest with me. Like I'll always know like that they'll be truthful with me. And that's sort of like it's like, it looks like a sweet behavior, and like, they care about where you end up. And so it seems like they're being really caring and they're being really honest, which seem like really healthy qualities. But as you said, like as things progress, it can become more and more unhealthy, and, even abusive.
So our next question is, which of these was not a discussed type of abuse today? Physical, emotional, time, sexual, or spiritual? Ooh, we got some quick answers with this one. Awesome. So the correct answer is time. So time was not a type of abuse we discussed today. Natalie, do you actually want to expand? I feel like you can do a good job, or do you want me to continue?
Oh, no. So yeah, we did discuss, I see some folks said that sexual abuse was not discussed. We did actually go through sexual abuse, but time was not a discussed form of abuse, even though time is a boundary from the boundaries workshop last week. And so that's all I had to say. Did you have more to say on that?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I feel like, yeah, most of the folks got this right. I think, sexual is when we're talking about any violation of our sexual preferences and negating consent, or not, being able to consent. And so we can revisit that if anyone wants to contact us for the slides, we can provide that information as well. But yeah, absolutely, time was not a discussed type of abuse. However, that's not to say that someone someone may or may not infringe on your time boundaries, right? Doesn't necessarily make it an abuse, but it is definitely a boundary that we can have disrespected for sure. And so, and leaderboard, we've got CD moving up to number 1. Next question. Which of these was not a discussed relationship theme today? The relationship itself, jealousy, independence, codependence, or communication? So there were 6 possible relationship themes we talked about today. One of these was not something that we discussed. Ooh, looks like we've got some confliction here. I had a feeling this was going to happen. All right, so drum roll, please. The correct answer is codependence. This is interesting because the relationship itself was actually the first relationship theme. And so it is, I had a feeling this one would be selected because it was one of the first themes. And so when we're talking about the relationship itself, what we're looking at for that relationship theme is really acknowledging what do we need from this relationship? What are our wants, our needs in this relationship? What are things that we're not willing to compromise on, or things that we will compromise on in regards to our boundaries within that relationship. And so really just looking at the relationship itself as being the first theme. Codependence is something that can exist in an unhealthy or potentially abusive relationship, or a relationship that's out of balance, essentially. And so, Natalie, do you have anything you'd like to add before we move on?
No, I think you got it.
Okay. So CD, still number one, leading at the top. Next question. What are the 3 common stages in the abuse cycle that we talked about today? So is it dating, suspense, and explosive? Is it falling in love, marriage, divorce? Was it the honeymoon, tension building, explosive, or none of the above? This was in the video we watched. Awesome. So the most common stages in the abuse cycle outlined in that video were the honeymoon, tension building, and explosive stage, which, I mean, in other words, could also be, yes, you're maybe dating, there's that suspenseful phase, and then there's that explosive stage, for sure. However, you know, the terms used in that video were the honeymoon, tension building, explosive. And so I do also want to acknowledge that, like, when we talk about, I hope you all come to our power and control session, because we will expand on the abuse cycle and what it can look like outside of a cycle, and just using that power and control in general outside of a dating or honeymoon kind of situation. But again, these are the 3 stages of abuse that we talked about, so it's awesome. Next is CD, and they are still at the top of the leaderboard. I think this is the last question coming up, so make it count. This one, yeah, okay, last question. So what are the 3 components to maintain independence in a relationship listed in the Venn diagram that we looked at? So what were those 3 Venn diagram sections to maintain in a relationship? The us, them, and everyone, me, myself, and I, myself, us, and them, or id, ego, and superego? Sweet, 100% guessed correct. It is the myself, the us, and the them. And so again, making sure all 3 of these are in balance most of the time, majority of the time in a relationship. We're not focusing too much on ourselves and neglecting the other people in the relationship. We're not focusing too much on just the relationship and nothing else. And we're not just focusing on that one person and neglecting everyone else, including ourselves. So trying to make sure they're all in balance, and recognizing that sometimes we might need to care for ourselves more, or we might need to care for the other person or the relationship more. But, you know, in general speaking, trying to keep them in balance most of the time. And so with that being said, our winner is CD with how many points? Oh, 7 out of 7 points. Awesome. So you set for bragging rights. So congratulations.
Yeah.
And with that being said, we will move on to kind of wrap up this session. Just give me a second to close this. Oops. Awesome. So thank you so much for, and so these are some resources that we have that you're more than welcome to use or refer to at the end if you're looking to learn anything else. Is my audio work? That's from my computer. But yeah, these are some resources you can use to follow up in regards to different, in regards to like relationships or even boundaries and communication and consent. All of these resources have a little bit of all that information. We encourage you to check them out, screenshot, or get Natalie to send you the slides where you can have the PDF copy of this and click just to access the resources immediately. And so we do have a grounding activity where we would like you to try and find red items in your space or any item of the same color that you can find if there's nothing red. But the point of this activity is to try and find red items. And why are we doing this? It's to identify, when we're identifying items in our space that we may or may not have noticed before, this can help ground us and bring us back to the here and now moment. So this can be helpful when we're overwhelmed with negative or harmful thoughts. So for example, if I am in the middle of a workday and I'm feeling very scattered and very lost and just feeling like the world is too big to handle and tackle, and I'm just spiraling out of control. I like to focus on the here and now. So I'll pick a color, using red as an example, and I'll try and find everything red around me to just really bring myself back to this space, this here and now. And so with that, I welcome you to share any items that you have that are red, if you want to add them to the chat. Actually, I forgot we have a word poll if you want to go to, or a word cloud poll if you want to go to the Slido again. You can also, I think, yeah, and then we'll give you contact us to get this. Also use this QR code or link in the chat to fill out our certificate and survey, or fill out our survey to be able to get your certificate. And you can do that by scanning the QR code here with your phone or using a link in the chat that Natalie will add in just a second. And someone says they had no idea how much red they had around me. Interesting and great exercise. Exactly. And that's why I like to do it, just picking a random color. I just picked red because, again, I hadn't noticed how much red, like random red objects I had around me. And it was just nice to sort of just be reminded, be brought back to this space, this head level. So again, thank you all for participating. If you are interested in the slides, or if you have any follow-up questions, please email Natalie. It's pub.ed.ameliarising@gmail.com. She will get the slides to you. In addition, if you are interested in that relationship activity I had mentioned before, it's a relationship orbit activity where it can help you identify connections in your life that you may or may not want to strengthen or distance yourself from. And so that activity, if you're interested in learning more about your relationships, you can email Natalie and she will send you a copy of that activity and the slides as well. If you are interested in doing that extra learning and just processing and learning about yourself. So with that being said, we will head out. If no one has any questions or comments or concerns, if they're having issues accessing the survey or their certificate, I see folks in the Slido have added some objects that they found. So someone has a red lunch, a red pen, red labels, a red bag. I have a cherry, well, the top is red, it's a red lip gloss thing. And I have my red phone case, or not phone case, glasses case. So again, if you can't find something red, you can always just use another object or another color. But yeah, it's a good grounding activity to kind of bring us back if you're ever feeling like the world is too much to handle, which it often is, I find.
Red.
Natalie,
there's red for me in this. Oh my God. Yes. And also the recording dot is red at the top of the screen. So that's something that's like, it might not be in your space, but it's sort of like right there in front of you. And I can see like a red skirt in my closet. So yeah.
I don't know. I just always like that. Maybe next week we'll do a different color or a whole other activity. If you have any grounding activities you want to send us, you can also do that as well. So yeah, I will just play some music in the background. But if you don't have any questions or comments or concerns, or if you're good to go, you're more than welcome to continue on with the rest of your day. And we encourage you to share this recording with others once it is accessible on our YouTube page. And again, if you want to get in contact to get these resources, you can send us an email or visit our website for some more information and to browse our education resources and our calendar and all of that fun stuff if you are looking to get more from Amelia Rising. And thank you for joining us. And I will stop the recording now.